Now our keynote. Rashan Senanayake is changing education in not only the design industry, but also in 21st century education. He is the founder and CEO of Australia's leading professional development in the 21st Century Educational Institute, Inspired Education Australia. In addition to this, Rashan is also an author, an international speaker who delivers content to universities around Australia, as well as countless seminars, keynotes and lectures. Rashan's podcast, Inspiring Design with Rashan, is now a top 200 education podcast in the world, and as well as known as #1 design education podcast in the 21st century of 2019. In addition to this, Rashan is also an academic in design and design thinking at both QUT and the University of Sydney, as well as an associate fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Rashan is also a global shaper for the World Economist Forum and a United Nations Young Professional Queensland chapter. Please welcome Rashan to stage.
All right, can you guys hear me? Yep. We've had a bit of an unusual start this morning. I've got to apologize to each and every one of you, mainly because I kind of lied to you guys because this is no longer the title of the keynote. We're going to change it up a little bit. Oop, here we go. Let's turn this on. This is the new title. The reason being, when you get to the end of this amazing guest panel that we have today, you'll kind of understand and hopefully drive home a strong message on the importance of design and technologies and especially the teachers within that environment. So one of the things that I want to understand from you guys is what you think, and we're going to not consider this a traditional keynote where we're constantly having one person up the front talking and then everyone else just listening. Let's keep this more interactive. So what I want you guys to do is wake yourselves up a little bit and you tell me, what is design and technology education? Let's see who's brave enough to start off. Anyone want to be a leader? Yes?
It's the order of the words.
It's the order of the words? Okay, fair enough.
That's the revolution that needs to happen.
As in design comes first? Cool, good. Anyone else? We've got, yes? Teaching kids to problem solve and finding efficient ways of using technology. That's great. What else? Anyone else want to run to the mic as well? More than welcome to. But I feel like you guys are still a little bit sleepy. Let's wake you guys up. Anyone else? Come on, we have teachers from all over the state and I believe some people from international areas as well. Give us a few more bits and pieces.
It's allowing students to design something but also fail. Fail is not a problem. It's a learning opportunity if you don't allow them to get involved.
Yeah, I love that. Allowing failure in the classroom as being a norm. And this is something very important and it's a bit different from traditional education.
Following on from both of those, teaching kids to design and problem solve using a design process which incorporates failure and incorporates problem solving.
Love it. I feel like you guys should come up the front and do the keynote. I'll just go and sit down. But that's a good start. So what we're going to do is keep that interactivity going on. If you actually have any questions in the meantime, obviously raise your hands and we'll keep this more of a informal area. But let's kick things off. So for those of you who don't know me, my surname is ridiculously long. You would have guessed that it may be Sri Lankan. So I came here when I was about 10 years old, went through high school education and was very lucky to have an amazing graphics teacher back then. Now he's a deputy principal at one of the Northside State schools. And since being in Australia, working through design, education, and technology, these three overlapping areas has been the key focus across the board. So if any of you would like to learn more about this stuff, you're more than welcome to jump onto that site and have a look. But this gives you a bit of a quick snapshot of myself, because I do have some teachers still asking me whether I'm still in university studying. So it's just one of those things, and that's why I try to grow a beard. So some of you may have already listened to some of the podcast episodes, and we're actually going to do a little bit of that at the stall here today and invite each and every one of you guys to have your say. We're really focused on understanding the problems, the challenges, and information in this ever-evolving space. And hopefully what I'm going to give you guys will give you a bit of an insight into that. This book was recently launched for your students. So again, using the design thinking principles, but from a life design perspective. And hopefully that will allow you guys as a tool towards working on it. And secret, we are actually working on a second book, but specifically for teachers. So, as Mark mentioned, I did deliver the keynote in 2019, and back then we went through a few bits and pieces that it's knowing how the world has changed in the last 3 years, it's actually really interesting to do a bit of a comparison, which is what we're going to do very quickly. So if you were there, you may remember hearing the term Industry 4.0. Does that ring a bell? Who was actually here in the 2019? Just raise your hands nice and high. Okay, good. Some new people. So if you weren't there at that conference, this might be some new information. But Industry 4.0 is what we're supposed to be in, and we're now, there's information if you Google, if you YouTube, this thing will understand that now we're towards 5.0. And these design disciplines, especially that my right, your left column, is the traditional design disciplines that we're pretty familiar with. But we would detail some other ones that are now been about 10 to 20 years in the making. And you may be familiar with those, you may not. And I'm going to show you exactly how that list has built because of the technology that's in play currently in the industry, almost quadrupling that list. So the career opportunities that your students are now learning, the skills that they're getting from the things you're putting in front of them, is propelling them in a way that you might not be aware of. These are some of the areas that we detailed when it came to design and technologies about in the 2019 conference. How familiar are we with these? What are your thoughts when you see that kind of list of applications that design and tech teachers are supposed to know? Just awkward silence. And look, that's 100% usually the case because it is an overwhelming amount of information constantly evolving. And we looked at the soft skills versus the actual tools and technologies that we need. This was the things in 2019, and we compared it to what Iron Man 1 actually did in the movies in 2008. But if you watch the movies now, you'll kind of get an understanding of a bit of a prediction of what's about to come. And we talked about the fact that 2035, 40% of the jobs will be either removed or evolved or obsolete by in about another 17 years' time. So this is the kind of world we're living in. So how do we actually prepare our students for this future world that's changing almost on a yearly basis? So what I'm going to do is give you guys some understanding of where the top 9 technologies are when it comes to the actual industry, what's being practiced here, as well as overseas from a global capacity. Most of this, in fact, 98% of the Fortune 1000 companies have these technologies working, and they're constantly looking for skills and people working within this environment. So every one of the students underneath your tutelage is actually working towards this world. So the number one thing is AI and machine learning. How many of you are familiar with this or have heard of it? Raise your hands if you're okay with it. Most of the room, excellent. So to give you guys some facts and figures, when you're looking at machine learning, this is the kind of industry and job opportunities that we're looking at from a global capacity. So if your students are actually in regional Queensland or metro, they're in Melbourne, it doesn't matter. As a country, this is the opportunity of a market that they can actually access. So when you think about how much of a large industry that is, when you think of 190 billion, there are so many more job opportunities than existed actually 10 years ago. That's just in one of the tech areas. Some of those careers looks like this. So compared to the 2019 list, already we're adding another 4 to it. All design and tech, but specifically in the combination of learning those skill sets but applying within the AI and machine learning. Number 2 is what's called RPA. So another word for that is robotic process automation. So this is a fancy way of saying we're going to get the robots to do the work we don't want to do. It's that simple. So automating a lot of the production and manufacturing across, when you think about advanced manufacturing in specific, this is the situation. One of the people that I recently spoke to was an orthodontist who's combining 3D printing and laser cutting, CAD, and design thinking to actually produce about 30,000 orthotics custom tailored to the customer's needs every month. So if you think about a small team of humans, we physically can't do that. So this is where RPA comes into play. And because of this specific technology, 9% of the global population is now obsolete, as opposed to 3 years ago. So the jobs that we thought no longer exist. They're 100% wiped out. We think about where the future is headed in the next few years. We're looking at 5% completely automated and about 60% to be partially automated, which means that as a professional, we need to be able to understand, especially your students, what their job will entail with regards to automation and how that's going to evolve the way they work. So this is something that they need to be aware of, how that's coming into play. And these are some of the careers they can access right now. And the funny thing is, in about 3 years' time, these may be evolved. Every one of the career options that I'm putting up on the board over this next half an hour to 45 minutes is 150K plus. Most of them starting salaries are 100K plus. We're talking mostly US dollars as well. So very, very lucrative career opportunities coming, and that's very attractive for your students. Who's heard of edge computing? Few hands. Who's heard of cloud computing? Good. So if you think you know cloud, forget about it. It no longer exists or it's evolved. So the difference is when you're looking at what cloud computing is and how edge computing is what the skills now require, you're actually looking at an evolution in how the data and the computation happens. So where the computation now happens on the devices itself, right? Giving the control to the people, and you'll notice how the products we use, the cars, the phones, IoT devices, all of those bits and pieces that's now becoming more normal in our lives, that's where the computing power is happening. So edge computing is simply a bit of a reshuffle. So this is where the next link in Cloud 2.0 is headed. So when you're looking at the current market, it is a 6.72 billion market in edge computing. In this room, we probably had about 5 hands go up with me. We were talking about edge computing. Excuse me. Those 5 people have an opportunity to access this as opposed to everyone else simply because they know about it. So put this information in front of your student. These are the current careers that are available coming from that particular technology. So it's still called cloud, because if you put out an ad with the word edge, people aren't going to be aware of it. So they're going with the flow at the moment. But you'll notice that will get phased out over the next few years. Number 4, is quantum computing. So this is, again, this might sound like these are things going over your head, but they're actually the stepping stones from the same subject content that you're constantly teaching to your students. Quantum computing is literally one of the key skill sets that's embedded into all of these Fortune 1000 companies led by the ones you're seeing on the screen right now. So massive market again, but relatively early days. And yesterday I was scrolling through Facebook a little bit mindlessly, but one of the things that I came through was the fact that there was a Google employee recently made redundant because he thought his AI that he built using quantum computing has become sentient. So if you think about what kind of a world that is, that's literally the movies we watched 5, 10 years ago. So that's the kind of thing happening at the moment. And some of the skills when we're looking at what your students can work towards is literally this. And some of these words might be pretty familiar when you're looking at STEAM subjects as well as design and tech. So this is hopefully giving you guys a bit of an understanding on the common pattern. All of your hands should go up when this comes up. Who's familiar with VR and AR? I'm glad. Good. I'm very happy to see that. This is a very cool market. So obviously the top 3 industries, you're in that. When you're looking at a global capacity, education and training is the biggest element, and now teachers are starting to actually create content within VR for their students. So similar to the world where we used to go on Word, create a PowerPoint slide as a lesson plan, now teachers are starting to actually create content in VR. It's just where the world is actually headed. So when we're looking at some fun facts, that's the scale in the number of devices sold when I delivered the keynote in 2019. And back then we predicted that it was going to be an exponential rate, and it is spot on. So that's a heavy industry. And when we're looking at where this is actually headed, this is where it currently stands over the last few years. So just if your students can understand and have a love for VR, just that industry alone, they have a lot more career opportunities than existed 10 years ago. If you want a bit of a snapshot on the leading ones, these are the best ones. So if you've gone to our workshops in the past, you may have had some experiences with VR, putting on the headsets and understanding what these headsets are capable of. But currently, as of 2022, this is what stands. That comes with a bit of a caveat, because by the end of this year, there'll be 2 others that will change that. When you're looking at the skills, this is a very interesting keynote by Meta that you should listen to on YouTube. The amazing types of thinking, technology, and the actual creativity behind development of this, just in that VR tech. This is where the fun lies. That's the way I see it anyway. And Apple's going to be releasing one later this year, and same with Oculus releasing their premium version, which will about what they're saying is quadruple what's possible with the previous headset. So most of the existing headsets will become even more affordable and more compatible with the devices that we had five years ago. Who's heard of blockchain? Can anyone tell me what blockchain is? We've heard of it. Anyone want to tell me what it is? Who's brave? Let's see. Yes?
Give it a run. Everyone always shuts off when you try to explain it. How I understand it is essentially you've got essentially like a list of data, and as you make a change to that singular list, it checks it to make sure that it's all the same. And so it's a centralized, like decentralized information checking.
You're in the ballpark, 100%. So the key word there is decentralized. So thank you for actually having a go, because everyone else was like, don't look at me. So well done to you on that one. So it is decentralized, and it is supposedly unhackable, which is why it is actually considered very much an evolution, especially with regards to cybersecurity. In another way of saying it is, it's only data you can add to. So you physically can't take it because it's in a network conceptual sense, a whole array of computers around the world that keeps an accurate log of every single thing. So if you're adding to that, you cannot change it without changing every other computer that's connected, right? So that's why it's physically impossible. That's why more companies are using this. When you're looking at the current careers that are ridiculously lucrative when it comes to your students, design and tech students being recruited, risk analysts, tech architects, so being able to design and work with these 2 elements, design and technology, constantly overlapping, this is where currently they are looking for people. So this is where students can actually excel. Blockchain is something that we can talk about until the sun comes up, so I'm going to keep giving you as much information as you possibly can. But another one that you might be familiar with, number 7, is IoT devices. Fairly common now that the term has been around for about 20 years. What is it? Don't you just love it when you put questions? And you should be familiar with it being teachers. Your students just avoid eye contact. Yes?
Your fridge, vacuum cleaner, your everything that's attached to the internet to be able to do the next
100%. How many of you have a fridge that actually connects to the internet? Fair enough. Fair enough. Kind of. Has anyone seen a lawnmower that connects to the internet? Yes, good. You're right. Perfect description. It is everything, all these different devices, and there are actual fridges. And I specifically remember running a workshop in Bundaberg where a group of design teachers came up with this idea of a smart fridge where it will know and tell you the groceries list, and it'll sync with Woolworths or Coles or your preferred brand, and that will then physically do the order list for you, and then it'll get it delivered. So your end-to-end automation of your groceries was done, and this was done by you, like design teachers, and that was in Bundaberg. Will it sync with BWS? Potentially. So those ideas were done by the actual creative design thinking process when teachers actually walk through it. But those ideas actually exist now, mainstream, with the leading guys like LG, Samsung actually doing these things. When you're looking at what that looks like, it is 50 billion devices currently in use. So that, when you're thinking about an 8 billion population in the world, and parts of the world doesn't have internet, most people will have anywhere between 3 to 10 devices on average, especially in the Western countries. It is a 1.1 trillion industry right now. That's by far the most leading, simply because you can come up with an IoT device for every single thing, even farming, manufacturing, design, work environments, home, doesn't matter, lawn mowing, BWS. And 10 days ago, I'm not sure how much you guys follow tech companies. If you haven't guessed already, you've got the vibe that I do. So 10 days ago, this is where the software upgrades are going, and the car's integration with our phones is happening as we speak. So most cars now have Android and CarPlay, Apple CarPlay. So now they're working with the car manufacturers to actually sync your devices so the displays and the functionality is more streamlined across the board. So this is where the future of our cars are going to look like, not just a small screen where you plug your phone in, right? So that's in the next few years. If you're looking at the computing powers of a home device now, I'm not sure if any of this jargon makes sense to you guys, but if you're looking at an average computer in a school, or most normal university computers currently that we have in mass production, this is about 20 times the computing powers. That's purely for the purpose of actually home computing. So this is where the data integration is coming in. And 2 to 2.3 times a 10-core CPU PC. So those simply allows us to do more and more. And when we're looking at the top skill sets, design being one of them, a very crucial one is information security. So being able to understand how data privacy works, how to manage that, what's the ethical context behind it. Software and hardware integration alone, when you're looking at the room around you right now, even the devices here, there are industrial designers, software applications, UI, UX designers. All of these applications are coming out over and over again, the common pattern being design and tech. 5G, again, something you might be familiar with. Telstra's been running that out for about 4 years now, I think, from memory. And we're not even Australia's 5G doesn't compare to what some of the other countries in the world is currently running at 5G. So wait until those elements actually hit our shorelines and actually bring the way we're actually working through. The 40% of the world should be theoretically covered by 2035. And if you're looking at the biggest brands who are leading this, it's a matter of time, simply because there's a lot of incentive, technology, and funding behind it. Number 9, the last one is cybersecurity. So if you're coming from an ICT, IT background, or you have overlaps with that in your school, this is definitely one of the leading elements that a lot of people are looking for. Cybersecurity being one of the things I believe Gateway to Industry School ICT constantly talks about, simply because there are, again, design and tech students, a possible career opportunity coming from that. So when you're looking at where that's headed, the reason I put this one last was because this one is growing 3 times more than every one of the other ones at the moment. So again, these things are fast evolving, so in about 3 to 5 years' time, it might be a whole different world, but currently it is 3 times faster, 3 times the amount of recruitment looking for skill sets in that area. And these are the careers. If your students have ever heard of wanting to be an ethical hacker, right, these are jobs that didn't exist probably 5 years ago, right? Malware analysts, security designers, and engineers. So being able to, again, apply the design principles, engineering principles, but simply to a different industry, different context. So those are the transferable skills, both of which you're teaching. Any questions? Yes.
What on earth is ethical hacking?
Good question. So ethical hacking is actually, in a nutshell, working to understand what a hacker would do, but you're batting for the other team. So you're actually reverse engineering the process to actually test systems, hack the security, and designing protocol towards it. So again, if you watch movies from the last decade, there are people that work for the government, FBI, CIA, police, that kind of do those kind of things in a conceptual sense. This is now a real job. It's not just for a movie context. 2022 skills, putting aside the tech element for a bit, when you're looking at the 2022 skill sets, these are the global top 10 skills coming straight from the World Economic Forum. So I want you to take a quick look and tell me if your students, if your syllabus, if your curriculum, if your pedagogy is aligned with that. If not, thoughts? Sorry?
Where are the traits?
So this is simply soft skills when they're looking at the most across every discipline, every industry, every country, right? So very large. Trades come to a part of manufacturing, so it is definitely not obsolete. Shouldn't be looked at it that way as well. It's integrating within these elements. So technology, complex problem solving, trades keep coming up within that. It's just evolved. Any other questions?
At the university level, are they keeping up with the innovation that's taking place as educators in high school or schooling system? We are teaching skills that lead towards careers that we yet to sort of see evolve. All of the careers that you've mentioned, I wish to direct my students to explore in that career. Traditional university courses don't sort of align to that.
I would reserve that question for the guest panel because I believe we have someone perfect to answer that better than me. Let's keep going. When you're looking at the things that have declined, same report from the World Economic Forum will detail some of this. So you'll notice some of those elements have shifted compared to what's actually growing or trending, but some elements are actually declining. You'll probably wonder why things like reading, writing, maths, and active listening is declining.
Who is the decline?
Very true, very true. The reason for that is those skills are now not becoming a highlight, they're assumed. They're embedded into, when you're looking at, for example, creativity, originality, initiative, active learning, learning strategies, all of those elements are coming as a part of it. So it's a mix of how the world is looking at these skill sets that's in blue, as well as what we're considering decline. Same as 2019, when we talked about job losses, it's actually job evolution. For every, I think, rule of thumb here, it was for every one job that was lost due to automation, there was another 4 that was created, brand new or evolved. So it's simply shifting how we're looking at the world, and this is where we're kind of going at the moment. And LinkedIn did this worldwide survey again over the last 4 years, and one of the things they identified was 85% of the 2030 jobs haven't been created yet. So that's where your students are actually coming into the industry workforce. The key skill being overlapping design and tech. I'm loving that there's hands going up. Yes?
Sorry, just on your previous slide, with the defining skills, is that from a, not the right word, but a positive or negative position? So those defining skills, say with reading, writing, math, and active listening, are they saying that that's a problem or something that's not needed anymore?
They're saying it's part of the problem. They're not saying it's not needed, definitely not. It's evolving. It's assumed.
So it's assumed, but it's a problem.
It is a problem because
All of our staff that come to the school, reading, writing, and math, and the only test that really nationally tests that is NAPLAN, and reading, writing, math in most schools is going to 7.
yeah.
It's not great data.
This is where education 4.0, or sometimes what's called 5.0, is evolving, where this perception of what we have as the traditional 8, 10, 20, 30 years ago of the labels, how it's actually changing to what the world is looking for. So the way you should take this is actually looking at the blue context as skills that are currently in demand, where in a global sense, where your students actually have the capacity to work through. When they're actually doing complex problem solving, and they're part of it. So an example is actually walking through the research component or empathy mapping in design thinking or critical thinking, you will naturally get reading, writing, active listening. So it's embedded into a lot of the things. It's just difference in labels. And again, I'm not arguing from a curriculum perspective.
That's my question is more around the fact that reading, I'm just picking up.
No, 100%.
So reading, writing, and math isn't a focus skill anymore because it's getting applied at its mind elsewhere.
100%. And maths is something that's fundamental in technology. Zeros and ones, if you're thinking about it. Some people got it, some people didn't. It went over their heads. So I'm loving this. Hold those questions, because this is why we have a guest panel, so that we can actually do an active discussion. So 85% of the jobs. And when you're looking at the #1 skill across all of those elements, it's design thinking. You're probably sick of me saying that by now, especially if you've come to my workshops in the past, but this is actually why this is constantly driven home. And your leadership, especially from a school leadership level, need to understand that this is why our students need to be prepared. And the last few slides I'm going to show you will hopefully drive that home a little bit more. So when we're looking at those skill sets now, before I go on to the next part, does anyone have any questions about what you're seeing here? This was from the 2019 keynote. Does anyone have any questions about this? Are we familiar with everything that's on the board? No hands are going up. I'll ask again. Are we familiar with what's on the screen? Okay, cool. If they Creators economy design is actually, if you're looking at the companies like Airbnb, they're known as the biggest real estate company, but they don't own anything. Uber is known as the largest transport companies. Maybe that's not the word, but they don't own any cars. So it's designing systems like that. So it's giving the power to the actual creator. So if you're looking at Canva, it's an online free software. It's giving the power of design at a base level to the actual student or whoever's creating it, right? So that designing that is called the creator's economy. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Just in reply to that, the creative economy for local governments is going to be taxing Airbnb or rating them 50% higher.
Yeah, probably. Probably. Yeah. That'll be great. 100%. 100%. Now I'm going to add the details of the previous ones that I've just outlined in the last half an hour. Right? So these are the current ones that your students can access, again with the 2 transferable skill sets of design and tech, overlapping every single one of those elements. Doesn't mean that we're actually getting rid of the ones that we had before. So keep in mind that architecture, industrial design, landscape, they all still exist. And they all still need to carry on. So this is simply building the career opportunities that your students have, learning the same thing. Personally speaking, I came from an architectural background. I'm very thankful for QUT for giving me those skill sets. So if you're looking at studying architecture and again applying design and tech just into other disciplines, those transferable skill sets are constantly going forward. So theoretically speaking, we could, as long as we're learning the subject content of whatever security design might be, we can actually then work within that context. We can go into AI architecture. You're just designing what's called an artificial intelligence code or whatever that product looks like versus an actual building space or a physical product that an industrial designer might do or a landscape architect who might design a beautiful park. So this is where the constant evolution of what design and tech is, and this is why it's becoming the base across the board. So these all are going to continue, and this list is going to constantly grow, especially looking at 83% of the jobs not being created that will exist in 2030. So your students actually have a very bright future. So, bringing it back to you guys, let's address one of the key problems is design and tech integration in schools. Working with you guys, different states, and this is a global problem, by the way. So if you're feeling like this is an issue in your school, definitely not. It's not an issue in the state. It's not even an issue in the country. It's an issue everywhere. So well, the whole planet. I'm assuming outside the planet it might be a little bit different. For the time being, let's work within the planet. These are just some of the elements that need to work together. Think of them as gears. Actually, thinking about it now, I should have designed those slides as gears. But we have squares. Those elements need to work hand in hand with one another. And these are the hurdles where constant issues can rise from teachers. And when we're looking at how they speak to one another, and this is a conceptual diagram, by the way, it shouldn't be taken as a Bible, but they're all interlinked with one another. So a lot of teachers have issues with integrating with it. You might have the passion to actually work with VR, for example, but you might lack the skills, you might lack the support, you might lack the policy, the pedagogy, the schools might not be interest from the schools. Parents might be thinking something else, leadership might be saying something else. So all of these things actually need to work hand in hand. So this is what's called the systems problem. It's not actually an isolated incident. So one of the things that I wanted to inject and really drive home with this keynote was that you, as design and tech teachers, need to keep the passion up. Don't lose hope with regards to these issues, because we're all in the same boat if we're looking at it. And at the end of the day, we're fundamentally working towards our students' well-being over the next 5 to 20, 30 years, how they're entering into the workforce and working towards it. So that's why I changed the title of the keynote. That's why it always starts with you, the design and tech teachers. And the reason I added with STEAM is because those foundational elements are still important. And obviously technology falls within that. So one of the things I wanted to invite you guys was, one, have your say. So if you are not camera shy, you're welcome to come to our booth and share something about what's happening in your school, whether it's a tip, a trick, a fun fact, a challenge, a success, a complaint. If you just want to vent, yes, all of it is welcome. Maybe I shouldn't have said vent. If you're feeling like you are camera shy and you don't want to actually say it in front of a discussion type environment, there'll be a big board where you can actually add a post-it note, right? So that will look like this. Hopefully by the end of the conference, we'll have a collation of your thoughts in that. And what we want to do is actually send a photo of that across Australia and share it with the other DATTA organizations, share it with countries outside teaching design and tech, and hopefully put it in front of the World Economic Forum as well, letting your voices speak. So that's welcome to do. Come and talk to us, whether it's myself or Bethany from our stall. Have that say. Literally before we go, I have one last thought. So when we're driving home this message again to hopefully ignite a bit more passion in yourself, when you're looking at Australia as a country, we need to be more competitive with our strategic alignment in the next 5 to 20, 30 years where the country's headed. And a lot of that success lies within the hands of our students. And they don't really know that because they're still students. So for Australia to be competitive on a global stage, design and tech needs to be the most integrated. The key word there is integrated subject matter within Australian education. The word is integrated simply because it's part of every other subject matter. Because it is integrated in industry across the board. So that's why it's literally the #1 key overlapping transferable skill set. And yes, you can quote me on that. More than happy to take anyone for a further discussion on that from that point onwards. So hopefully that would have given you guys a bit of a oomph. Keep up the good work. So that's it from me. What I'm going to do is hand you over to Brittany, Assistant Education Minister, and she will walk you through some additional bits and pieces of what's actually happening within that. So let's please make her feel welcome and give her a round of applause. You should flick it over.
There we go. Okay, good morning everyone. It's great to be here with you. I love a conference with teachers, and so to have so many of you here in the room this morning, it's just wonderful. And particularly to see so many ITD teachers from right across the state as well. My name's Brittany Lauga. I am the Assistant Minister for Education in Queensland. I'll just see if I can get this working. Can I start by thanking DATTA and Mark and your team for organising this wonderful conference, to Rashan for your great presentation and your commitment and dedication and passion to education in Queensland as well. And can I also start by thanking you all as teachers in Queensland and the commitment and passion that you have for educating young people right across the state. It's one of the pillars of our government, of the Palaszczuk government, to give every child a great start in Queensland. And you as teachers in classrooms in our schools play a fundamental role in delivering that for our students right across the state. I have come from Central Queensland this morning. Mark flew down yesterday, but I flew down this morning. So I've had an early start, 4 o'clock wake up, And I have a 4-year-old daughter who's just nighttime trying to train out of nappies. So 4 o'clock start with a wet bed wasn't great, but I raced to the airport and here we are. Did you say you had one too? Same. Great. It's wonderful that we've got these same challenges here. So it's great to be here, and I have a presentation to give you a little bit about the work that we're doing in the Queensland Government to help grow the number of ITD teachers in your schools. I know that this is a big issue for many of you. We have a huge demand for ITD subjects right across Queensland in our state schools and in our Catholic and independent schools. And the ITD subjects that you will teach are probably the most in-demand subjects in Queensland, and yet you probably face the greatest teacher shortages in all of the departments of your schools as well. So you've got this supply-demand problem that's happening, and in the Department of Education, we're working pretty hard to try and fix it and to get you more staff and resources. So we know that technologies remain the learning area with the greatest number of reported vacancies by Queensland state schools. And I'd say that that's probably the same in independent and Catholic schools as well. It remains an important specialist area in all state secondary schools. You know this, but a lot of people don't realise that ITD makes up so many subject areas now. And when you ask people what ITD is, a lot of people still think it's the old school manual arts workshop, but we know now it's so much more diverse than that. And there's growing demand from industry, from students for these subject areas. So our challenge is to cultivate a pipeline of technologies teachers to build the safe modern classrooms with technology that reflects industry, and also sourcing technologies teachers, specifically manual arts is where we've got the greatest area of shortage in Queensland. As of August last year, and this has increased since then, there were 23 vacancies for teachers who can teach technologies. Now that's according to the Department of Education with Queensland state secondary schools, but we know that this is much higher because a lot of schools have stopped even trying to recruit because they know that it's just too difficult. So we're working as part of the Queensland Government on the Industrial Technology and Design Teacher Pathway Program. What does that involve? So we have developed a learning pathway solution and there's consultation to co-design multi-phase learning support model incorporating the identification of some minimum standards, EOIs for existing teachers wishing to move to ITD specialisations. And we've started working on this. We've got about 40 teachers from other specialisations who are currently doing upskilling to then go and teach in ITD subject areas. Granted, we know that this is only a short-term solution because we're taking qualified teachers from one subject area and putting them into ITD classrooms. So the other subject area heads of department aren't very happy about this, but it is a short-term solution. We do have more medium and longer-term solutions that we're working on as well. We also have vocational competency program, safety awareness. I know that this is really important for you in your classrooms, is the health and safety in your classrooms, and also practical pathway and support resources. So the ITD Teacher Pathway Program, there's two departmental offerings, which is the minimum standards program. So 36 teachers are completing this program in the near future. They're currently underway. Some of you might be in the room who are completing that, or some of you might have some of those teachers at your school. And we have 38 registered for term 3 this year and 40 registered for term 1 next year. And also the Certificate 2 in Engineering Pathways, which enables teachers to deliver VET in schools as well, if they also have a Cert 4 in TAE. So 20 have now commenced that qualification and 23 from cohort 2 have enrolled. We're also working with higher education institutes, TAFEs and universities that focuses on areas of design, technologies, pedagogy and curriculum. There's a number of other complementary professional development programs out there, and I won't go through all of them, but they involve programs through the department, through the QMEA, the Queensland Resources Council, the Queensland Teachers Union. DATTA offers some complementary professional development as well, and also CQ University is offering some micro-credential workshops to provide participants with foundation skills in those areas. You might have heard about the Queensland Government's program called Turn to Teaching. It's a program, almost $20 million program, which is a paid internship for, as part of the Great Teachers, Great Future program. So the idea with this program, and it started just last year, our first cohort of teachers are studying this year, and it's to provide an alternative pathway for people who already have an undergraduate degree in another area. Whilst they do their 2-year masters, they effectively work as an intern in schools. So the first year they receive a paid scholarship of $20,000, and in their second year they have a part-time position in a Queensland state school where they're continuing their study but also working in a school as well, and can utilise that employment as part of or as a form of employment and income while they're doing their study. We have 300 places available over the 3-year program. In 2021, we had 299 applicants. There's 100 places that were offered, and 64 aspiring teachers accepted that offer, and they commenced in 2021. Disappointingly, of the 64 who accepted, only 3 are ITD specialties. So in the future, because we have applications opening at the end of this year for the next cohort, I'd strongly encourage anyone who might be considering a career in ITD teaching to consider applying to the Turn to Teaching program, because I think it'd be great to see more of the cohort in the ITD area, especially considering we know that this is an area that we have a great shortage. We're also working on a trade to teach proposal, looking at ways in which to encourage skilled and experienced tradespeople to become teachers. And as you know, tradespeople have to do a 4-year undergraduate before they're eligible for registration of the Queensland College of Teachers. And often that 4 years of study for someone who may have years of experience in a trade, it's a great barrier for them, especially when it comes to income. So we're looking at a similar model to the Turn to Teaching model, where providing an alternative pathway for people with a trade qualification in a possible earn and learn type internship model as well. In terms of technology and infrastructure, because I know that this is really important for your school and for your classrooms, classrooms in ITD classrooms are changing every day, and gone of days of the traditional sort of manual arts and graphic design workshops. We're now seeing more junior and senior workshops, a real sophistication in the resources that are available, design spaces, robotics labs, specialised equipment and technology, external construction spaces, sometimes as big as sort of make-believe or make-up construction sites, and building site replication. Health and safety is very important, and there's a really strong emphasis on health and safety in the design of our new classrooms right across the state. They're larger, we want them to be cleaner, in the way that in logistics and storage, the lines of vision, ventilation, we need them to be more ergonomic, inclusive, and the auditory health, specialised furniture and fittings are all very important in the design of our new classrooms and refurbishment of existing classrooms as well. Digital technology is absolutely imperative to ITD, and the department is absolutely looking at the way in which AR and VR is utilised in our classrooms. The department is exploring an opportunity with Labs as a Service through Microsoft Azure, which is a cloud-based, or maybe we should say edge-based, Rashan, on-demand pre-configured virtual environment. And it provides capabilities beyond existing hardware and software. So it'll be exciting to see that develop, and hopefully in the near future we'll be able to talk more about how that will look when we roll it out into our classrooms across the state. Bandwidth also is incredibly important, and I know is a frustration for many, particularly those in regional and remote parts of the state. But I'm really pleased that the department has a $187 million 5-year agreement with Telstra to upgrade every Queensland state school's bandwidth, which I'm really pleased about. It's not just a South East Queensland upgrade, this is something for right across Queensland. And we're taking it from 25 kilobytes per second for every student to 1 megabyte per second by September this year, which is 40 times faster, and 5 megabits per second by 2026, which is 200 times faster. The department's also looking at their monitoring maturing low orbit satellite offerings, for example, Starlink and OneWeb. That is the end of my presentation, but it's wonderful to be here with you all, and congratulations and thank you for the work that you do in our schools. ITD subjects really are where we're seeing the greatest amount of demand by students in Queensland, and this is really the cutting edge area of our schools where we need more students studying ITD, we need more teachers teaching ITD so that we can have these students ready for the jobs of tomorrow. Well, I would argue they're probably the jobs of today, but the jobs of tomorrow are already here today. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to the panel discussion where we can have more in-depth discussion with your questions.
All right, everyone. So the good news is we've got about 15 minutes more extra time than we originally planned for the guest panel discussion. So more time to actually iron out some bits and pieces. So let's give Brittany another round of applause. Yours truly. And next person in line is Lisa Sharon. Now, Lisa is the head of school from the School of Design at KUT. She's incrementally doing some amazing things at the School of Design, and some amazing things are actually coming forward, but I'll let her speak more about that. But can we please make her feel welcome and give her a round of applause? Mark, let's get you up on stage as well. Let's give Mark another round of applause. DATTA Queensland president, and obviously head of department at your school. No, just teaching. Just no worries. But every one of you should be pretty familiar with Mark. And last but not least, Jody Mccauley. She's from the Gold Coast Manufacturing Hub, and she's the Skills and Training Officer. Let's make her feel welcome as well. All right, so I think maybe let's kick off with a little bit of an introduction, whatever you guys like to share. There's a microphone for you guys.
Okay, good morning everyone, and it's lovely to be here. As Rashan mentioned, I'm with the Manufacturing Hub Network, which is a government initiative by this state government. I've worked in the Townsville region and the Gold Coast, and I work with industry to identify and put them on the right career pathway to upskilling their existing workers.
You know me.
Hi, I'm Professor Lisa Sharon. I head up the QT School of Design. I've been at QT about 4 years now. Feels like a lifetime, but I came from the University of Canberra, where I was also leading the design disciplines, and then prior to that, Deakin. So I've been kind of on a global journey. I'm originally from New York and kind of made my way here via China. So I've got a lot of experience teaching around the world. And currently at QUT, we have a very holistic design program. So our Bachelor of Design covers everything from architecture, industrial design, interior design, landscape architecture, interaction design, and fashion design, and visual communications. Visual communications is the area that I'm actually from, so I still practice as a designer. We're working very closely at the moment in my research practice with Queensland Health, and we're doing a lot of co-design with Queensland Health. We have a big project with them called HEAL, which is a healthcare acceleration lab. And we've been integrated into all the hospitals, many of them in Brisbane, but also parts of Queensland and Cairns and central Queensland, where we're helping them redesign elements of the healthcare system. So we're bringing designers from our postgrad and undergrad programs into the hospital setting to work out better ways to, for instance, we have a design for a new mannequin that we're developing. We develop new designs for kids and the shields, face shields that were a bit scary for kids during COVID, how we could make that more playful and fun and less scary for them. So those are just sort of a taster of what we're doing. But at the heart of everything we do in our program, it's very transdisciplinary because I want all students to interact with each other. And I think that's the future. One of the soft skills I think should be up there is to be a truly transdisciplinary designer, understanding that all of these disciplines interact, not only with each other, but with areas such as allied health. So we're trying to get students integrated into practices where they might never have had interaction before. So definitely allied health. We've also had projects with students with culinary arts and looking at nutrition and different aspects where designers can make a difference, but also working together from the grassroots level instead of going, oh, a designer does this and a chef does this, thinking about how they can collaborate from the beginning to create a truly innovative product. So that's a little bit of overview of what I'm all about, but we'll get to that more, I think, as you ask your questions.
Thanks. Hi, Brittany. Just a bit about me. I live in central Queensland. I was the only girl in my IT class as a high school student. We spent our days mucking around, but no, seriously, doing upgrades to CPUs and HTML coding. My dad was probably the nerd who got me into IT as a kid. We got our first computer when I was grade 1. I sent an email and thought that I was going to be in trouble because it was going to cost money. But he used to ban me from the internet when I was in trouble, and we had dial-up in those days. So he used to do, I think it was *49*. If you put that into the phone, it would block any outgoing calls. And so I quickly realised that if you just hit redial, it would put the code in and unblock it again. Then when he worked out that I was able to hack that, he blocked the phone line by going down through the cables and unwiring the dial-up cables, which when I had a no dial tone trying to dial out to the internet, I sort of just followed the cables around, found where it had been disconnected, reconnected it, used the internet at my leisure for that day, and before he got home that day, undid it again. So I think I'm sort of, maybe I was a bit before my time in terms of hardware engineering or something, and maybe I could have been some sort of ITD expert, but I ended up in politics, so I don't know where I went wrong.
All right. Just wondering if we could move this so then that way these guys can actually see as well. Can we move these back a bit? There's cables, right? Okay. Not easily. All right, let's leave it as it is. But who wants to start off the discussion? Any questions? So obviously we've got the 2 microphones there. You can direct it at the whole panel or anyone in specific. The whole thing is keep it a lively discussion, free for all. Go for it. We've got the first one there.
Hi, I've got a question for Brittany. I'm at the end of my career. I've been teaching since 1971. I'm in a school that needs an upgrade, and I look forward to your government doing that. We've been told we'll never get an upgrade because we're in safe Labor seats. One is actually the National Treasurer and one is the State Treasurer. Our school was last upgraded in 1976. What is the chances of us getting an upgrade in the next 10 years?
Great question. Thank you. What's your name?
My name is Ron and I'm at Kingston State College.
I didn't catch it, sorry.
Ron, as in later on.
Oh, okay. Well, nice to meet you. Thank you for that question. Look, I would love to come out and have a look at your, sounds like dilapidated classroom, and let's fight to get you some funding. We've delivered record education budgets for the last 7 years. The Treasurer is about to hand down his budget again next week. And, you know, it does frustrate me when there are classrooms that really need a lot of work, because we're delivering record budgets, we're spending money right across the state on improving our classrooms and giving the teachers and the students the quality classroom, state-of-the-art infrastructure that our students and our teachers deserve. So I look forward to hopefully being able to come out and see your classrooms and seeing what we can do to get some improvements.
Morning, panel. I'm never short of something to say, so I thought I'd get up and ask a question. Supporting pathways and seeing a line of sight from secondary schools into technology courses at a university level, are there new university degrees that we should be directing our students towards? Are they still the traditional electrical engineering design?
Absolutely. There are different pathways, and now we even have double degrees. So it's becoming increasingly popular for students to get a double degree. Particularly at QUT, we offer that option in almost all of our design programs. One of the most popular double degrees is visual communication and business at the moment. But one of the ones that I think not many high school teachers are aware of is interaction design, which is also different to what Rashan had up. This is in IVD. This is interaction design. So this is how we interact with all of our digital experiences. So these are people that will be user experience designers, will design apps, will design interfaces, will design for AI and all those new technology, all the fabulous things that Rashan talked about. And what is becoming a popular, should be more popular, degree combination is interaction design with IT. So a Bachelor of Interaction Design and a Bachelor of Information Technology will prepare students for a lot of those options that Rashan had there. So we're also in the School of Design offer kind of a holistic suite of units called the Impact Labs. This is where students interact with all of the design disciplines in collective units. This particular program just won a QS Wharton Reimagine Education Award, the top award last year, because of the way that it integrated students, not just with other design students, but within the community. So we work with community partners in Brisbane. So a lot of them are nonprofits in Brisbane with small startups, so students can see how those companies started their business. They give them the story of how they work, but then students work with them to come up with new innovations together. We also work with global partners in that program. So we sort of build them from local to global, and then they work out themselves their own design personality profile, where they want to go in design. But definitely, I think there's a lot of options to direct students into double degree options. We also have a lot of students doing Bachelor of Engineering with Bachelor of Design. But within their program, there's a flexibility for students to change majors. Industrial design, we still have the traditional. We have architecture, industrial design. Visual communications is one that we keep flip-flopping the name. It used to be called graphic design. Now we call it visual communication design. It's sometimes known as communication design. They're often sometimes attached to the traditional titles for these things, but they evolve within the degrees. The reason why we don't name something, what was that, hacker? The ethical hacker. We don't have a Bachelor of Ethical Hacking yet. But certainly a student could take a Bachelor of Design and a Bachelor of Justice and learn a lot. We have a whole suite of units around criminology, within our School of Social Justice. So students are able to learn these particular skills, but they're probably not going to have the specific job title. One reason why we don't name degrees specifically for job titles, because job titles change, cloud changes to edge. So, and also it's attached to our research outputs and things like that. But certainly there are lots of mixes and combinations for students to take that will make them really agile. And our programs are constantly evolving because we're always making sure we have the most up-to-date technologies, and that we're teaching students a cutting edge, and that we're embedding them in the community with practitioners. That's one of the strengths of QUT, is that we always try to get tutors. Rashan's one of our tutors, actually, that are really trying to understand and are at the cutting edge of their industry, so that students have that exposure. But we welcome also you to spread the word on things like, for instance, I know that there's probably a lower understanding of what interaction design is. I was expecting that to be one of our most popular majors, but it's still gaining traction. I think students that would have gone into that are going into things like visual communication design, which is our biggest major at the moment, and or possibly industrial design. But definitely that's probably the growth area. Those are the bulk of the jobs. The student with the background in interaction design will be very employable.
And I think if I can add to that, one of the approaches that we need to take is understanding that these things are transferable skills rather than aiming them towards a particular bachelor's or the job title. To give you an example, when I went through high school, year 12 was 2007. And the graphics teacher at the time was my manual arts teacher, but one of the things he recommended was if you were interested in design, and at the time I was thinking about medicine personally, but then he actually suggested design might be a particular pathway, and he suggested architecture as one of the elements. It might be industrial design. So he showed me an array of options that I could take, and one of the things he recommended back then was if you're thinking about building design or architecture, think about taking physics and chemistry and the maths, because it's going to help you. And at the time, going through the senior subject selections, it's a very important thing to understand that coming from the educator, because the students don't know what else is out there unless it's coming from the educator. So it's just different labels now. That's what I think needs to be taken rather than aiming towards a particular bachelor's. That'll happen.
Good morning. Sorry, this is more of a question and I suppose a challenge to Brittany, knowing your recognition through PIA. I'm saying this as a former town planner myself. It's not just the earlier thing that was raised by Ron. Across the board, schools need those upgrades. Can we look forward to a better strategic planning point of view for infrastructure upgrades to the schools, not just the state, but working within public-private partnership to make sure that we're all able to deliver those upgrades? I understand that the state, some schools need those upgrades, but in my area, there's a shining new state school. 1, 2, 3 suburbs over hasn't had that upgrade, and they're both high growth areas. Infrastructure planning across the board needs to be done. It's not just road, it's not just rails, it's planning strategically for all systems, not just the infrastructure, but the soft infrastructure that supports this.
Thank you. Great question, great points, and wonderful to hear from a fellow town planner here at the DATTA conference too. So there's two things that I'd like to say in response to that. One is, first of all, if you're a state school teacher or a state school head of department here today, I'd strongly encourage you to work with your school leadership to have your school or your department's needs integrated into the state school infrastructure plan that your school has. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's a document that the school leadership puts together and sends to the infrastructure branch of the department, and that lists out the priorities of infrastructure upgrades for your school. Then the department then works with the school as to which are the priorities, and then as capital works money is flowing through the budget, it's allocated to different projects. So I strongly encourage you to do that. Secondly, and it probably is 3 points. Secondly, this sort of reminds me of a bit of an underlying problem that I feel as I sort of move around schools, is that ITD is a growing area of, a growing subject area, growing in demand, resources are scarce, teachers are scarce, but I feel like in a lot of schools, particularly in the leadership areas, there's ITD is a bit of an unknown and a fear of the unknown as well. The ITD department is sort of, down the back, and, you just sort of cope and survive, right? There's not a lot of interest in the development of the ITD department or subject areas. So if you're left and forgotten in the back, then you're not necessarily going to be the priority on the infrastructure plan. So I think that there's a role that we all need to play and that I'll continue to play in promoting the importance of ITD in our schools. The English department, the maths department, science, the rest of them are all important, but ITD equally plays a role too. So we need to work to increase the awareness and understanding of our school communities of the work that teachers and students are doing in the ITD areas of your schools. And Rashan and I have talked about this, about how we can better promote what's happening in your departments to parents and students to ignite that interest and awareness of the cutting edge stuff that you're doing in your classrooms. Finally, the last point I was going to make was about, no, it's escaped me, but I'm sure it'll come back. But certainly I'd check to see where your ITD needs are in the school infrastructure plan.
Yeah, hi, I'm probably for Brittany. I'm Michael. I run the Whitsunday STEM Challenge up in sort of central North Queensland. It's a not-for-profit charity we had to set up as teachers, basically, to get funding from BHP, H&E Parts International, a whole pile of companies, to put together STEM challenges for the kids up there, because obviously there wasn't anything up that way, and we decided to do it ourselves. Problem is, we do it by ourselves, we do it in our own time, and it's a pretty heavy workload. We also develop a lot of curriculum for up there, which has come down to schools down here, including school-based human-powered vehicles, all sorts of things, which has been done before, except we do it in carbon fibre up there. So we get a lot of funding. But again, the time we have to put aside for that, last year nearly burnt me out running it, and we don't get a lot of in-school time to do that at all. Even when I went to one of the principals one day and I said, any chance the regional director could come out? No, he's got bigger things to do. So I went, well, if we're not getting support from government, and we're out running these things, and we attract hundreds of thousands of dollars a year up there for this stuff, and we're about to try and push around Queensland through the charity we've got set up. How do we get you guys, how do we engage with you guys, how do we get you to actually come along, and even with the other universities, how do we start engaging with you to actually grow this? We just lost the Maryborough Tech Challenge. It's just gone, and that was a huge event. These things, have you even heard of the Whitsunday STEM Challenge?
Thank you, and congratulations, and thank you for the work that you're doing with your students to grow STEM and to encourage them. The teachers do put in a hell of a lot of work outside of classroom time. Anyone that says that a teacher only works school hours is, lost their mind. My mum's a primary school teacher and I barely saw her as a kid. I'm more than happy to talk with you more about how we can support your students, but it sounds like you've got a similar problem where this sort of lack of awareness and understanding about what happens in your ITD classroom, you're sort of out the back, unassuming, going about your cutting edge work without much noise, but you're doing amazing stuff and that needs to be celebrated. So I'm a supporter and I'll work with you to raise that awareness and to get that greater level of support from the department, from the community and from your school.
Okay.
A couple of things. Did you want to? No, you're right.
I think we have an opportunity as DATTA Queensland. We've got, I think, only 3 or 4 nominations for this teacher of the year. How can we promote you if we don't get the nominations? Our student awards that we run later in the year, we only get 50 to 70 across the board, and Lauga and junior from a couple of schools. We're not getting, how can we promote you for us if we don't get any advice? I know it takes time, everything takes time, but we need to step up as well. Radical change, put it into newsletters. It's hard, but unless we do that, we can't get that force moving to realise, I think we should be the centre of the school because everything comes back to us from what we do. If we look at our destination surveys in our schools, the academic is on there. We're going into trade in the workforce and going to university. The why school, that might be. Why schools and our education in our schools leading to that. And
and not into the practical areas. But it comes back to us a lot of the time enforcing it.
What I have to say kind of builds on what you're saying. The senior syllabus curriculum like stuff in technology under ITD is incredibly prescriptive, like ridiculously so. You can mark kids down for not using more than one divergent thinking strategy in design. The other element to that is we've lost some of our general subjects, like tech studies is gone. The focus is on applied. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think the prescription of the assessment is limiting student creativity. I'd be interested to know how it's being assessed at a university level, and will we ever see more creative subjects come back in design technologies that actually see a program, an idea through to fruition. So that, yeah, how are you assessing it at universities, and do you think there's scope for future subjects to be added back to the technology curriculum? Thanks.
First, I have to say that we have a lot more freedom over our curriculum than you do in schools. I know that for sure. So we don't have, even the TAFE system has a lot more rigorous sort of competencies they have to do, where we can take a more holistic approach in a university. We're governed by TEXA, so of course we're self-accrediting for most of our programs and are overseen by the TEXA Higher Education a qualification agency. But what we try to do is we're trying to give students this pathway where they understand that they may not become an architect when they finish, like Rashan. They might start out doing that, but we're trying to give them such a broad range of skills and an understanding of critical and creative thinking, so that when they finish, they will have the opportunity to transition into different things. And I think that's why the Impact Lab program won the QS Wharton Higher Education Award, Reimagine Higher Education, because what we show with that program is it's not about any one discipline or any one skill set or any one computer program or type of technology. It's actually about a holistic approach to design education where students are learning that critical and creative thinking collectively and then applying it with the community or with businesses to affect an innovative change. I don't know how you can embed that in your rigid high school structure. I don't teach in high school and I never have, so I'm not going to say how that could actually be affected. But I have to say that the students, we bring them through that process in university, but when they come out of high school, I do find that it takes a little while for them to break out of the mode of high school. And so we're seeing more and more, like, it takes like a whole year for them to get out of that like mode where they think they're being marked on these certain competencies, and where we get them that space to the space where they can be creative, where they can be critical thinkers. So I think that probably needs to be some kind of shift, but as I said, that would be back to you, Brittany, probably, how you would approach that. But I have to say that is one of, and when Rashan put that list up, critical and creative thinking, that's the future. Because I studied graphic design in university. Every single software program I learned is either redundant or has moved on so much that it doesn't even resemble the coding or the application that I used. And I say that to the students that I teach, like that, those software programs though were helpful in understanding the way those tools worked, like any set of tools. So I can apply that to lots of different tool sets, how I approach learning them. But I have to be flexible in my understanding of things. But the core is my creative thinking processes. And that's how I got every job that I've got. Not because I was a whiz at Photoshop, which I'm good at, but you know. QT didn't hire me for my Photoshop skills. So anyway, I'll turn over to you, Brittany, about how that might be affected in high school.
Yeah, thank you. ITD is dynamic and the syllabus is not. It needs to be, to be frank. You know, I think your laughter is agreement. We need it to be more dynamic, and I think that ITD is probably one of the most dynamic subject areas in a school. But our syllabus is based on sort of a machinery of syllabus and how, it turns over time, but ITD is moving at a much faster pace. So it needs to catch up. So I take your feedback, and where's the person who just asked that question? Thank you. So I take your feedback, and I take your feedback about creativity and the creative subjects in ITD probably needing a rejig, and looking back to how we take the rigidness out of the syllabus and the marking, and actually allow for that flexibility and creative environment that is the dynamic side of ITD. Yep, for sure. And I think we need to start earlier as well. In my daughter's kindy, they have a B-bot and they have an iPad. But what else are we doing to encourage creativity and problem solving in our early years, so that when they get to high school, we do have a few sort of general subject areas in the syllabus for ITD in primary schools, but we really need to be embedding some of those core skills that you were talking about, Rashan, from a very early age, probably from birth.
And in marking creativity, actually, can I ask a question from you guys? Just raise your hands if you've ever been to a design thinking workshop with us. Sweet. What's the definition of innovation? Anyone? Anyone remember?
This is why Rashan is a good tutor at QUT.
Does perceived value ring a bell? So innovation is perceived value. So marking creativity is actually a very difficult thing, and you can't prescribe it. But one of the important things is, I think, whenever we're marking things, even in impact labs, is understanding how the students actually got to that end point. Sometimes their visual communication might not be strong for them to represent that idea, but that's something they can pick up along the way of Photoshop skills or 3D modeling or whatever. So that's the technical skill set. So we always look at the ideation behind it, the iteration, how they got to it, not just treating it like almost a one step, here's my ideation or the concept, and therefore that's done. And I think one of the important things with the educator is understanding that problem solving and creativity requires failure. So not putting boundaries on the student and encouraging them to fail and test things and almost run around, but within a bigger field, because when they get to industry, they're going to have a lot more constraints like budget and codes and whatnot. So university puts a lot more aligned constraints within them for them to run around, but at a high school level, they can even do that even more. So that will give them the confidence to actually build that creativity, which is unique to them. So I think the educator needs to allow that room for movement. I'm not sure if that answered your question. And I think that's what the alignment shift needs to be. Then it aligns with the university context, it aligns with an industry context, and we're setting them up for success.
I think that's been our biggest challenge since probably 2000s, is that the realisation that we're no longer the making or that old 1950 style walk-in.
Sorry, Mark, can you please use the microphone? Is that okay? Thank you.
That 1950 style of workshop where we just make a product because that's what we've done in the past. We've got to now, and it's hard to change. I've been trying to push this for 20 odd years now, and we still have that mentality. We walk in and we're making the serving tray. Yep, no, the Year 9s make that every year. We've got the material cut, that's it. To be able to put in design into that is getting the parents, admin.
Dustpan.
Yeah, dustpan. And if we change that, and I mean, how do you do that in either a term or a semester with our kids? And that's the challenging part. The creativity is there, and that's a shift in our thinking and admin's thinking and parents' thinking, because they still think and believe we're going to make something.
Thank you, Mr. McMullen.
No, it's enough.
Thank you.
I've got it. It's mine.
Put it down.
I think, and then when we come into our seniors, we've got to realise we're educating them for our future jobs. I had a conversation with a friend whose daughter was going into university, didn't like it, and went out and worked in one of the manufacturing industries in Gladstone, who had to learn how to program a machine to use a CNC milling machine. How do we teach our kids to be able to do that without having all the other, oh no, you've got to know how to hammer in a nail, use a saw, all those things. There you go.
I'm James Lansbury. I'm the Treasurer of DATTA Queensland. I just want to ask Mr McMullen how happy you are that we went through university together, and about 10 years ago I dragged you into this. Microphone.
Yeah, thanks. I love microphones, as you can tell. To be honest, I've really enjoyed being involved in the association. As you can tell, I do have a passion for our teaching area, but I also believe in the syllabus and the design thinking process. Coming from trade, yes, it was easy. I sat on a machine for hours on end doing the same thing. But machinery now has moved on, and we can do that so much easier without the repetition, the back pains, all that. So we need to change that way of thinking. And you've got me started. And then seeing the changes and working with QCAA in the new development of our programs, that's been the really interesting part. Now on the trade to teacher program, putting our voices in to see where we end up. That's the highlight. To go back to teaching, yeah, that's fun. The kids are great. You see those little moments. But that's it, James. Thanks.
I've just got two other comments, not questions per se. I'm just not politician bashing or anything, but I'm glad that all classrooms in Queensland are now air conditioned. Everyone? Everyone? I work up in Toowoomba, and my engineering workshop on Friday last week, at the start of the day I could see my breath, and at the end of the day I could see my breath. So it was kept us going anyway. So that's all very good. Cheers.
Good morning. In some ways, as much observation as anything, actually, just sort of your comments more so than necessarily a question. But just hearing this morning, the session so far, there's been a real blend of technology coming in, and what you might call digital technology, along with design, which personally I haven't seen that blend before, sort of coming in together. Where I actually teach digital solutions and design. I don't know how many other teachers in senior do both. A lot of times it's one or the other, and a lot of schools still see it very distinctly as one or the other. But what I'm seeing here is a real blend of it all coming together. What's your thoughts on the future, in a lot of ways, of this blending of it coming together, of really using digital solutions and design, and in that respect, kind of coming together with teaching? One of the things I picked up on particularly was QUT there, with the subjects you're doing, particularly this one, interaction design. What's the chances of getting a subject like that pulled back down into high school, which really does sound like a blend of all of these things together, the creativity, the critical thinking? And as you said, a lot of our subjects are very prescriptive. And unfortunately, you rely, I think, on a lot of students coming through high school, which then feed into the universities. And there is this distinctive difference, I suppose, because a lot of schools now do science very well. Kids know they're a science kid, they're on a science pathway. We don't really have what you might call a technology pathway identity within high schools. Even design, to an extent, is still off in the corner somewhere. But getting that technology design identity within high schools as a pathway that really feeds into the universities, given the competitive nature that, well, Australia needs, as you're saying, in terms of developing our capability overall. Anyway, just some thoughts I'd put out there as observations.
I would love it if interaction was a subject, interaction design was a subject in high schools. Yeah, I mean, I've been teaching in this country at various different levels. So I taught at private colleges, all the way up to now higher education, and short courses and training for teachers at some point. So, and what I can see, every group of students, particularly a lot of our students are high school leavers. They come in and they are like, well, I was good at art at high school, or I really, really loved our architecture students. So I loved all the, building subjects and things like that. They've gone through the technology programs, but they don't really have a clear understanding of how their profession is going to shape up. And they always kind of fall back to, well, mom says I'm not going to make any money doing this, and I don't really understand this. And the parents come to us and say, how much money a year are they going to make in this? So I think it's, and there's that kind of, there's no real link between like the names of professions sometimes and the names of courses in some respect. Sometimes there are. But yeah, I think that, what we're seeing and what we try to do at QUT, and increasingly I see that the design industry is we're looking for holistic students that, they're not siloed. And even when I first came to QUT, our architect, and I'll tell you a story about the pandemic. So during the pandemic, of course, we all had to go online, and I know it was very, very tough for schools. It was tough at universities as well. And we have some subjects that are very applied. I'm sure all of you teach very applied things. And I knew that this was probably going to go online because I have lots of colleagues in the United States who were saying, all the universities are all going online. Like, you better prepare, you better get this online. And so we sat down with all of our 7 subject areas and said, okay, guys, prepare for online delivery. The one that was the most difficult to even conceive of anything going online was the architects. So the architects were like, oh my God, no. We've been fighting against online delivery of architecture forever. Please don't make us do this. And I said, we have to do this, okay? And it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same, and that's okay. It's going to be different, but you can. And then the academics in interaction design, like, yeah, guys, look, we'll help you. We'll help you make it great, and let's all work together. And the VisCom teacher's like, yeah, let's do it all together. And by the end of it, everybody was like, we can do this. It was like an hour meeting, and at the end of it, they're like, we can do this. But it took that kind of like shock jolt to go like, we have to do it. There's no other option. You have to go online, for us to like be rocketed into online. And look, we've had online education for quite a while, but no one could conceive of it. And particularly in some subject areas, we're like, well, this is how we do things. And I think that we need to look at like taking those boundaries off, those silos off of these areas to say like, I only do industrial design, I only do architecture, I'm only doing digital tech, or I'm only doing this. They blend. All of these skill sets are applicable. And the most employable graduates are those that understand that connection. And if they can get it at high school, that like, you're not just going to go and study 5 years of architecture and become a starchitect. You're not, okay? There's a very small percentage of people that become star architects around the world. Just as you're not going to go study industrial design and go design, the newest Bugatti. Maybe you will, but likelihood is kind of small. So, but you will go out and you will have a profession in design if you're open to lots of different areas. So if we can get to that in high school, so the students coming in are like not siloed themselves, that would be amazing.
Sorry, because I'm mindful of time, one of the things that I wanted to, I think we haven't tapped the resources of Jody here, coming from an advanced manufacturing context. There are literally 16 key industries that fall within this, within the label advanced manufacturing, and I think we should be directing some questions at her as well.
That was going to be mine.
Perfect.
I knew you were being way too quiet up there. So we're actually within viewing distance of a manufacturing hub in Rockhampton. Haven't been along to actually talk to them, but how can we utilise them in school? Like, how can we build those partnerships, get kids out in job placements, get them into school doing things? What do you offer?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would recommend that all schools tap into the manufacturing hubs that are in the region, which are across Cairns, Townsville, Rockhampton, Mackay and the Gold Coast. Industry need to have some buy-in to developing their future workforce pipeline. And the manufacturing hubs can be that link between industry and schools. So they can facilitate bringing industry into schools and or taking schools out to industry. And I think that it's vital that industry understand the skills that you guys are developing with their future workforce. And they need to know that there are a lot of transferable skills that are relevant to their industry. and they don't. They can inform the students and the parents of what they're looking for in their future workforce, because as has been pointed out here, we don't know the job labels of the future, but there are a lot of underpinning skills, and design-led thinking is the underpinning skill that will be transferable across a lot of the manufacturing industry. Yes, so you're Rockhampton, so you need to talk to Michael Elliott, and by all means reach out through Rashan and I can make that introduction for you. So I know on the Gold Coast I am really keen to connect with any schools to develop those pathways.
Thanks, Jody. I might just quickly add to that. The manufacturing hubs are amazing, and if you haven't been to your local one, please do. Just knock on their door. They'll be very pleased to see you. When I go to schools, teachers tell me that they have troubles connecting with industry, and when I go to industry, they say that they have troubles connecting with schools. So I like to be a bit of a conduit to make that partnership, and maybe after that question, it might even be worth if we facilitate some manufacturing hub networking opportunities between schools and those hubs, so that you can meet those people from industry. They can talk to you about what skills they're needing and perhaps inspire those students' work experience, job opportunities. Industry is crying out for the students in your classrooms. So if we can make those connections, it will be great, and industry will be really pleased to have you.
I'll also mention too that QUT has a partnership with the Advanced Robotics Manufacturing Hub, and that actually came from design. So we would also love to show you guys what they do at the ARM Hub, which is a very cutting edge and interesting project. It's partnered with lots of other universities, but QUT was one of the founding universities in that. And right next door to the ARM Hub is United Artists Projects, which is one of the top manufacturers of artwork in the world. So they are making like amazing sculptural works for galleries all over the world. They actually, if you're in Brisbane and you see the facade of the W Hotel, that was all manufactured at the United Artists Project. So they are creating really very interesting work. And that is a design student can go through our program and see that they could work in some place like the ARM Hub or UAP, which has, UAP started in Brisbane, but now they have offices in Shanghai and New York. So it's a real career pathway for someone going into design. And when we bring our students there, they're like, oh my God, I never knew I could do something like this. And that this is actually in Queensland and Brisbane. So.
Cool. Brittany talked a lot about like bringing teachers into the ITD space and bringing teachers into from industry in. But what's the big focus on keeping teachers who are here already in the job? There's a lot of teachers who leave within the first 5 years of teaching. There's a lot of people who are looking at the increasing demands of teaching and going, I would rather earn comparable money in industry and work less.
Great question. Existing teacher retention is, of course, important, paramount. You're already ITD teachers and we need you. The community needs you. Our education, our schools need you. You are important to our schools and to the whole community. Professional development, mentoring. I know that you're stretched for resources, often undervalued, underappreciated in your schools. There's so much more that we can be doing, and I meet regularly with the ITD heads of department every quarter and get a lot of this feedback. So I know that it's happening. We, of course, need to keep you working in our schools, and we're so grateful. I think part of the reason why I'm here today is I wanted to come and make sure that you know that you are appreciated and that the work that you're doing is incredibly important. But always happy to receive more feedback about what we can be doing to help retain our wonderful ITD teachers across the state.
I think that's all the time we have, but if it's an urgent question, obviously come and talk to one of us outside. We'll probably be hanging around. But can we please give a big round of applause to the guest panel? They all took time out of their day, obviously volunteering here, so I really appreciate each and every one of you, so thank you so much.